Welcome to the Vision series of interviews and conversations with stellar entrepreneurs, professionals. It's a pleasure for me to be sitting with Mr. Uday Kotak. Thank you, Uday, for joining us today. We also had the pleasure of having Uday accept the 2022 Chiratae Patrick J. McGowan Lifetime Achievement Award. Uday, thank you for joining us and thank you for accepting the award. It's a privilege and we are honored by that. I start with your journey in the beginning, and Google tells us that at some time you wanted to become a cricketer. You're very adept at playing the sitar, but you became an entrepreneur. Can you tell us how?
So this goes back a long time ago, 1979. I was playing cricket at the Azad Maidan grounds post my graduation and had just joined business school in Mumbai for my MBA. And cricket was a passion for me. And whilst I was playing cricket and taking a run between the wickets, a ball hit me from behind when the fielder was trying to get me run out. And that really blew me, literally. And fortunately for me, I was operated on within 3 hours of the injury, as a result of which I was banned from playing any cricket, which was my first love and passion. And my biggest claim to fame in cricket is that my coach, who I have had great admiration for, was the great Mr. Ramakant Achrekar, many years before he actually coached Sachin Tendulkar. So it's one of my great memories. And then that got me a lot more focused into doing something more in the area of business and economics. And family was always into the business of agricultural commodities. I did my MBA and was almost ready to join Hindustan Lever, which is exactly opposite the institute I passed out, which is Jamnalal Bajaj. So across the road was Levers. And that's when my father gave me a bit of advice and said, if you want to do something independent, I can convince the family to give 200 square feet of office space at Flora Fountain. And I was always passionate about finance. So I said, yeah, I'll give it a try. And I decided to start a business, which was a very simple business, bill discounting. And in those days, finance was a very closed area. More than 95% of the Indian banking system was state-owned. And I talked to a few friends, and they would be effectively putting their money in bank deposits at 6% per annum. And then I talked to a few people who were on the borrowing side. And one of my friends from my MBA school had joined a company called Nelco. A company where Mr. Ratan Tata started his career.
Yeah.
And Nelco was in the electronics business, large working capital cycles, and used to borrow money from banks at 17% per annum. It was also facilitating private financiers to be able to get funding for their suppliers for a 90-day period. So this friend of mine approached and said, if you're interested, we can take money at 17. I said, no, I will give you money at 16. And I went to my family friends who used to put money in bank deposits at 6%. And I said, what if you got 12 instead of 6 and your risk is a Tata company? So I was in business.
Yes.
And effectively making a spread which the banking system was making, which was between 6 and 17 to between 12 and 16. And that's how business started. We started with 2 or 3 people in that little 200 square feet startup. And life has been good.
Excellent. This is an amazing story. So your 200 square feet space was your that time WeWork.
Absolutely.
Overall. And when you started, obviously entrepreneurship was not in vogue at that point of time. Your father was very helpful in this. So did he have a hard time convincing family, because there was no risk capital at that time?
Entrepreneurship was in vogue in a different form, not the form which we are seeing today, where if an entrepreneur had an idea, could raise capital. But there were still many of us young people who were ready to start and take the call. And fortunately for me, my family background is much more entrepreneurial, and therefore it came more naturally in our case. And there's another bit of history which I think is important in that context, which shapes a person's life. I was born in a joint family with 63 family members in a single house.
Interesting.
And one kitchen. And that's how life began. So the core of the philosophy which our family was deeply believing in was a philosophy of capitalism at work, but socialism within the family.
So you started your journey and you did not take any outside capital in some sense. Was that company called Kotak?
Yes, originally it was a division of the family company, then we made it a separate limited company, but that's the time we took outside capital.
Okay.
So in 1982 when I started, it was a division of the family's trading company. And then in 1985, we set it up as a separate company. And I in fact went out and asked people to put in money. And one of the people I'd got to know since I started was Mahindra. So Anand had just come back from US and was in the family's steel business. And we were doing some bill discounting for him. And I said, we are thinking about starting this company. And he was happy to put a princely sum of money, which was about 15% of the company.
Which is
we
what
raised a
Series A
total
does
of,
today.
which was a total of 30 lakhs. I had to work hard to raise my money, including borrow from friends and family. And we started with a total capital of 30 lakhs. So Anand and a few other friends actually put in the capital. And at that stage, if there was even a remote acquaintance who had the guts to put risk capital,
you tapped him.
We were very happy. And they would come in and put money into the company. So we raised a total amount of 30 lakhs. And that was the starting capital.
Now, at that time you changed the name to Kotak Mahindra?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, difficulties, entrepreneurs and challenges go together. Any learnings for today's entrepreneur in the early part of your journey? What challenges did you face and how did you address them?
So I think one of the things about entrepreneurship is you have to be creative. So if we did not think about this very simple, common sense opportunity that banks were keeping a 1100 basis point spread and we were happy with 400. It would have been a big opportunity missed. A second opportunity which really came to us along the way was car finance. Till 1989-90, you could not finance a car from any financial institution in India. So Citibank started financing against cars.
Yeah.
And the Citi terms of interest were very simple. For some of you who understand the higher purchase market, it was 13.5% interest flat. So if it was an effective IRR in excess of 36%. So this looked like an interesting business for us to be looking at. And cars were in short supply. So if you wanted a Maruti, there was a 6-month waiting
period. Yeah.
So we figured out that this looks good. If interest rates at which you could borrow were 16% from banks and you get 36, it's a good business to be. But how do you compete with the mighty Citibank? And who knew us? So we came out with this simple idea that we will book cars. Therefore, we said, let us say, assuming we booked 5,000 cars. And we will take the interest cost for 6 months for the waiting.
You'll book under the Kotak name?
Under the Kotak
name. Okay.
And we'll take the interest cost for 6 months. And at the end of, within the 6 months, as soon as we get the car, we will have it transferred to customer's name. And against the interest cost of 6 months, we will ensure that the customers who take it from us should borrow from us, and at the same rate as Citibank. So we were not charging more. And this became a flourishing business for us. So we had got the best of customers. We were able to give immediate car delivery.
And you were the largest customer for various companies.
In those days, it was really Maruti.
It was really Maruti, yeah.
So this became a very interesting business for us. And some of our competition, including Citi, could not compete because New York did not allow them to book cars. They could have financed a car, but they could not book it. So this is the Indian innovation which we did. And we took one decision: we will never charge the premium. That means we will not take additional premium from the customer over and above the price of the car.
Which used to be running at that time because of the shortages.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the customer would not pay the premium, but would have to take the car on finance from us with a same financing rate as Citi. So the business was going well. But like you asked the question, what can go wrong? Entrepreneurs very often tend to become what I call as heady and exuberant. And we were also very young. We were getting initial success. We went public in December 91. Our stock got listed in April. There used to be a 3-month waiting period before stocks.
That was the time of the crisis.
Correct. So we had to do an issue of shares at a formula by the controller of capital issues. So we issued shares at 45 rupees. The share listed at 1400 3 months later, which was the peak of the Harshad Mehta boom. And then in May, you had the entire scam sort of hit the marketplace, and suddenly the markets crashed. So for us, our core business was sound, but because of everything that was happening in the financial markets, the Reserve Bank came in and said, you cannot rediscount a bill with a bank, which was one of our sources of funding. So overnight, a business line which was more than 70% of our total business shut. And this was sometime in second half of 1992.
And how did you manage that?
So we reinvented ourselves, and then we focused on more aggressively on leasing, on hire purchase, on lending loans, and started building a more traditional finance business. And bill discounting we did out of either our own funds or of client funds who would give us the money for matching, as some of the startups do right now. So we started doing some of that as well. So
you literally, in today's parlance, pivoted.
That's correct.
Very fast.
And a very dramatic pivot, because 65% of the business went.
I can possibly build some parallel. When COVID struck on 22nd March 2020, most of our businesses came to zero.
Right.
From, I think the largest business was at $350 million, it came to zero.
Yeah. So it was a big shock at that stage, but we were able to, actually it made us much more resilient. The second thing which actually we did was have a strong team of professional entrepreneurs, as I call it, with a long-term horizon of us growing together. And I call it a set of middle-class people getting together to build something. And then as we started rebuilding and getting into different areas of business, another shock came in, which was 1997, the Asian crisis. And when the Asian crisis hit, most of us in India really didn't realize it for the first year. But we got a sense that things are not okay. So contrary to all the other non-bank finance companies, we actually shrunk our business by choice and reduced our lending book by 50%. And when the crisis hit the NBFC sector between 1998 to 2003, you saw even the large institutions like Unit Trust of India went into problems.
Correct.
The IFCI, the IDBIs, all of them went through.
But you had already scaled back.
We had scaled back, and we actually saw more than a 90% mortality in the NBFC sector. So more than 90% of the NBFCs actually died.
And how did your 50% manage?
We obviously took some pain on that balance, but we had much stronger capital base because we had also done 2 joint ventures which got us capital. One was with Goldman Sachs and the second was with Ford Credit. So we had buffered and strengthened our capital base, and we had a much smaller balance sheet. So we actually survived through this. And then around 2001, RBI opened up for banking licenses. We applied for the banking license, and by 2003, we converted the NBFC into a bank.
So, 3 pivots in your lifetime, in the early part of the lifetime, for Kotak, which you addressed through agility, you addressed through change of business model, scaling back because that was the need of the hour. Great learning for entrepreneurs today. You mentioned one thing in the middle, which is when you were booking cars, you were not charging premium to your customers, which was amazing. Now, that must have built enormous trust. Today, Kotak is very, very dear to consumers for the trust which it has in the market space. When did you consciously start building the trust factor, or was it a piece of the pie every day in the morning?
No, I think finally you do what you think is right. You don't try and chase something which is artificial. And we felt it was right not to charge the customers premium, but we are in the finance business, we wanted customers for financing. We were not brokers or car dealers. We were just facilitating and making it easier for customers to get a car on finance from us. We were very clear what we stood for, and we stuck to that.
Now, you mentioned joint ventures, and in the past you've done a couple of acquisitions. Today's entrepreneurs to scale are also doing acquisitions, and typical narrative around acquisitions is don't do, it'll fail. 90% of acquisitions fail. Joint ventures fail because the Indian partner typically is not able to pony up the equity capital which the international partners do. Any advice to entrepreneurs? Today, entrepreneurs in India are scaling massively. In our earlier discussion, we were saying in our own portfolio, we have 4 companies heading towards $1 billion revenue each. What is your advice to scaled entrepreneurs on joint ventures and acquisitions, especially outside the country?
Right. So we've had a pretty good success both getting into joint ventures and getting out. So we partnered with Goldman, we partnered with Ford, and we partnered with Old Mutual in the insurance business. And all those stakes we bought back. We continue to have great relationships with partners. It's important that joint ventures are with specific objectives, and when either or both partners achieve those objectives, they do not remain forever. Joint ventures are not forever. It's very difficult to sustain joint ventures forever. So that is one.
So they have a limited time frame.
Absolutely. Or there should be a well-defined time frame, because finally in many cases the joint venture partners are effectively competitors in the marketplace as well. The second important point is on acquisitions. One of the bigger acquisitions we made was in 2014 when we acquired ING Vysya Bank. And we actually had got our eyes on it as early as 2007-8. Interestingly, this is a pre-global financial crisis. ING was eyeing us
to acquire,
to consolidate for growth. But of course, post-2008 crisis, the European banks went through rough weather, and our eyes were always on seeing how we could merge ING Vysya into Kotak. So we continued the relationship and pursued it all the way till we finally convinced them that it makes sense to merge ING Vysya into Kotak. And we were really delighted. Our focus on acquisition is very, very much value based. We don't like to chase acquisitions on the basis of relative strength of currencies of different companies. If I was writing a check, would I write the check for this amount for buying? And just because I have a good currency, if I misuse it, investors will not keep it a good currency. So my view on acquisitions is always think about an acquisition as if you're going to write a check. And if you think at that check you can make your returns over time, then it's a good acquisition. And one of the most important learnings in acquisitions is about culture and people and how you treat the other side. And we have gone out of our way, and some of the very important quality talent which we have today in the One Kotak is actually coming from the other side of the merger. And they've continued to be with us and build their careers here.
I must give you an anecdotal evidence of this. I was a customer to a Ingvaisha Bank branch, and when the event took place, one of the people said, "Sir, can I get a job, because we are about to be taken over?" And so he sent me his biodata and so on and so forth. Interestingly, 4 months later, he said, "No, I don't want to leave. I'm actually very happy." So
good to hear that.
Coming to the startup ecosystem, the startup ecosystem, mostly technology, is scaling up pretty well right now. Now entrepreneurs are coming, risk capital is available, and global investors are coming in, Indian investors are coming in. Any thoughts on your view on the startup ecosystem, how it's scaling? Is it producing value? And secondly, how does the current financial system interact with the startup ecosystem?
I think I'm first of all very happy that India is now able to provide early stage capital to a number of entrepreneurs. I think it's absolutely required to create a framework of risk capital available for people to ideate and execute. However, as you go down that path, I'm clear that in a garden there are some flowers which will bloom, some which may not, and that's the nature of this. And first, on the people side, entrepreneurs who don't make it, I actually think are the best people I would love to hire.
Yes.
Because the kind of learning they've gone through
is amazing.
Actually, it should be very valuable. So that is one part of it. The second part of it is people who succeed must focus on sustainability, because early success also creates a risk of hubris and weakness on governance, on management, on professionalism, on being fast and loose on regulation. These are the things which can later get them into trouble. Therefore, the core way for any startup entrepreneur or entrepreneurs, and including firms which support them, is to ensure that there is over time what I call as professional entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship needs the backbone of professionalism, and the two together make it work. And my advice to the startup system is, once you get to a certain level of success where the basic concept is making sense, quickly put in the framework of governance, of professionalism, of meeting the regulation, rather than being fast and loose. And many companies who look like they were on the way to great success actually falter, not necessarily at only early stage, but in many cases as they are making this pivot
to scale.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful experience to talk to you. I think the Indian startup ecosystem is going to look forward to the Kotak group of companies to in some way support them, and I'm sure after we put this out on media after the 11th, you'll probably get a lot of entrepreneurs writing to you saying, "Can you spend time with us?" But Uday, thank you so much.
Thank you.